The date, it was in March 1991. And they filmed a Soviet spaceship coming up and docking at the Mir space station, when in the distance they saw a cigar-shaped thing hovering there. And of course, Musa Manarov, who originally had the mission to film the docking, concentrated on this cigar-shaped thing and filmed it for several minutes. And in the film, you even see something like a rotating light going around this cigar-shaped craft. And Musa Manarov, in an interview he gave us, confirmed that he took the film, but for him the object is still unexplainable, and that at least it was bigger than the docking Soviet craft. Of course, in space you can't see distances because you don't have an atmosphere. You don't know if an object is a couple of meters away or a couple of miles away.
Yes.
But he believes it was rather a bigger object, and he was very confused by what he filmed. And the film was released already in 1995 at the UFO conference in Germany. And the material which was brought out by Giorgio Bongiovanni, by our Italian colleague Giorgio Bongiovanni, who also has some very, very good connections to Russia, and who got some fascinating films taken by the Russian cosmonauts Volkov and Krikalev in August of 1991, and films taken in November 1995, when a docking of the space shuttle and Mir, the Mir space station, was filmed and broadcast to the ground control in Moscow. And on this film you see several luminous objects maneuvering around the Mir space station, and some of them definitely under intelligent control. And it was just live broadcast to the ground control center in Moscow.
Several years ago, I broke personally two very large stories, wrote them on CNN and on NBC. Those two stories were the Soviet Phobos 1 and 2, the Phobos 2 encounter in Mars orbit with a 15.5-mile long object that apparently destroyed it. And we got the photograph from the Russians, ran it in the magazine, showed it on national TV, and the STS-48 shuttle encounter in 1991 that in live video showed an object rising from the limb of the Earth, traveling across the screen, suddenly making a violent 145-degree right-angle turn, shoot out into space a microsecond before something appeared to fire at it, crossing the exact point in space where the object had just been, just missing it. Now, I mean, literally millions of people around the world saw those two stories, saw me talking about those two stories, and then virtually from straight media, total silence.
Well, let me say this to you. It wasn't lost on me. I followed up on STS-48. I ended up doing quite an investigation, getting more footage and looking into it further, and I think you were right on the money with that one. I think we have to face the fact, we've all probably looked at the Robertson panel documents, which were originally top secret, the CIA panel of 1953, that states, the conclusion dealing with this subject shall be not to inform the public about it, A, and B, to treat it with ridicule if it comes out.
Yes.
And about how this information was removed from NASA's public files. They think it happened, and they think the reason we haven't returned to the moon is because we were told not to return to the moon. Whether or not that's true, that's what they believe. At least that's what's written in their official documents.
Now, this is still going on today, and there are people who are masquerading as media, appearing on television shows and ridiculing people and demeaning them Well, obviously, the Robertson panel, which was over 40 years ago,
accomplished its mission.
It's not just accomplished it. Whatever the conclusions were, still govern the dealing with this subject in media. Now, there are many, many media sources.
Sam, I hate to have to stop you there, but
Alexander Zatsepin wrote this music for the joint. He said, "What beautiful music, just the thing for our picture."
Yevgeny Stankovich is a 38-year-old composer from the Soviet Republic of the Ukraine.
Another UFO.
He's known as a composer of symphonic and chamber music compositions. The largest form among them are his second and third symphonies. These works are devoted to historical events in the Ukraine and the Soviet Union as a whole, the Socialist Revolution of 1917, the war against Hitlerite fascism. Yevgeny Stankovich feels that such events should be reflected in music, since they depict most vividly the best characteristics of the people: patriotism, humanism, and the love of freedom. Here's a fragment from Yevgeny Stankovich's Second Symphony, which the author has entitled Heroic.
We know the Russians are studying UFOs now. We know they've studied the subject at least since the late 70s, but how far back does it go? One man could answer these questions. We were able to find him. His name is Dr. Valery Budakov. Dr. Budakov has been mentioned in a few articles here in the West. Most of those references have been based on a single interview he gave to a Russian newspaper, but to our knowledge, no Western journalist had ever talked to him before we did, at least not on tape. You can roll this now. I'm pleased to share with you some of what he had to say about some of the biggest questions, specifically Roswell. Budakov worked for a man named Sergei Korolev, the father of Russian rocketry.
Korolev told me that in 1948 he was invited to the Kremlin to see Stalin. This was after the events in New Mexico and after the death of Captain Mantell. Stalin brought Korolev into a room where all the materials were spread on a table: Western periodicals, books, articles, UFO reports from the Soviet Union, information from special channels in the U.S. Stalin wanted to know, what did Korolev think about the material concerning Roswell and UFOs? Korolev asked to take the materials home to study them and was told no. He had to work there. When Korolev finished the work, Stalin asked him again his opinion. Korolev said the phenomenon is real. They do not appear to be dangerous to our country. They are not manufactured in the States or any other country. And the time will come when it must be further studied. Stalin thanked him and said the same opinion was shared by other specialists. We know that the U.S. Air Force possesses plenty of material about UFOs. We know the U.S. Navy also has plenty of material. We know about special orders given to keep all of the material secret. When curious people ask for the materials, they are told they're not there. For the near future, the most interesting materials will be kept secret. The owners of the material don't let it out.
Sorting fable from fact. Sorting fable from fact. Sorting fable from fact has undoubtedly been a problem to man since he first began to speak.
It's almost like an intelligence playing a game with us to make points that for some reason can't be done in some kind of straightforward dialogue that we all want. Everything seems to be symbolic and metaphorical. I have a quote from a retired U.S. military officer that was said to me in 1991, and this person wanted to remain anonymous, but his quote is so germane to everything we've been talking about. He said, quote, "The alien technology is so advanced, and the beings are so strange that no one would believe it. Keeping the public and media away from what's really happening is not difficult. It's a story that no one wants to tell, that no one knows how to tell. The truth is stranger than fiction," unquote.
Мне нравится, что вы больны не мной. Мне нравится, что я больна не вами, что никогда тяжелый шар земной не уплывет под нашими ногами. Мне нравится, что можно быть смешной, распущенной, и не играть словами, и не краснеть удушливой волной, слегка соприкоснувшись рукавами. Спасибо вам и сердцем, и рукой за то, что вы меня, не зная сами, так любите. За мой ночной покой, за редкость встреч закатными часами, за наше негулянье под луной, за солнце не у нас над головами, за то, что вы больны, увы, не мной, за то, что я, увы, больна не вами.
Another UFO.
Wrote his second symphony in 1975 when the Soviet Union was festively marking the 30th anniversary of victory over Hitlerite fascism. This was not the first time the composer used this theme. It's evident in the music he wrote to the film Fiery Path, which is about the liberation of the Ukraine from the Hitlerite invaders. The film depicts the heroism and bravery of the Soviet soldiers, scenes of cruel destruction throughout the Republic, including the Transcarpathians, the mountainous region in western Ukraine where Yevgeny Stankovich was born. The film was hailed by Soviet audiences, and the expressive music was noted. Yevgeny Stankovich's second symphony is a continuation of the theme depicting the struggle against fascism. Here's a fragment from the symphony, A Glorious Requiem, in memory of the fallen.